We are back.
Woo!
On Worlds Beyond with Cam and Ron. It's been 33 days since our last recording.
It's been
a lot's happened since then.
A lot of horror movies.
A lot of horror movies. Unfortunately, we're in Halloween hangover now. Halloween's over. Watched a lot of good stuff. Went to our first concert in over a year. Mm-hmm. Awesome show. We saw Epica and Sabaton, two European metal bands. They put on a fantastic show at the new MGM Music Hall at Fenway Park. Enjoyed that, and again, enjoyed Halloween. But we are here to finish up on the second half of Disney Plus's She-Hulk. We covered episodes 1 through 5, and now we're going to finish up with the remaining episodes. So, Cam, let's have it. How did you think this series ended up?
Well, I mean, aside from the very last episode, which I have some mixed feelings on, I think the 3 episodes leading up to that were probably some of my favorite. I thought they were particularly funny, and they fleshed out Jen Walters' character a little bit more, and those episodes were a little bit more focused on her, less so on guest characters, with the exception of one big one, which we'll get to. But I just thought, like, even in the last time we talked about She-Hulk, we were kind of like, there's all these different things going on, and we're not quite sure where things are going. They're introducing a lot of things, and they seem to be kind of thrown off to the side for a little bit. So the way it wrapped up kind of made that make sense, because it turns out they weren't really going with any of those things. And so they kind of pulled this left turn kind of twist surprise in the last episode that I think is going to go either one way or the other with people. Either you really like it and it worked for you, or it didn't. For me, it worked, but I wish that they had gone a little bit further with it and not ended it right there.
My initial reaction to the last 4 episodes is I still struggled to find where this show was really trying to go. We definitely weren't going on any kind of traditional hero's journey. We were sort of kind of getting into a legal procedural comedy, but not really with Jen. It was more just about what was going on in her personal life. Every episode, I just kind of felt like, okay, where are we going? And then the only time the threads seemed to come together for me were in the episodes where there was a major cameo. And then the show seemed to have a direction, but it was only a temporary direction. And so my overall reaction to the show is I'm a little disappointed. I don't feel like it knows where it was going. I just feel like it spent a lot of time spinning its wheels on a lot of, just sort of trivial things. And then, getting into the finale really took the whole breaking the fourth wall thing, which was a, recurring theme of the show. And I think they almost broke another dimensional wall,
right? Yeah,
with all the things they
forward.
And some of that stuff worked. It was some of it was interesting, just how far they took it. But I would agree with you. They sort of did it, and in spending all the time they spent in the final episode doing that sort of like, well, here we go, we're down the rabbit hole or out of the rabbit hole, whatever you want to get. When they finally got back to the actual story, it was like, oh yeah, and it's over, and this is all done, and here we are, and we're at the cookout at Jen's parents' house. Overall, I just, I have more to say on kind of specific thoughts and different aspects of the show, but I wanted to like the show much more than I ended up liking it, and so the best moments for me were all the cameo moments, and it's disappointing that it seemed to me like the show sort of leaned on its cameo moments to get it. I mean, if they weren't there, I wonder what you think on that question. If the cameos with Wong and Emil Blonsky and Daredevil weren't there throughout the show, how much would that change your...
Well, it's funny because I don't even see... To me, Daredevil was the only true cameo, whereas maybe Wong too, but Emil Blonsky and Wong felt
and Ruffalo
more...
for that matter.
Even Ruffalo felt more like they were part of the story, whereas, like, to me, Daredevil felt like kind of a stretch putting him in it, but, like, he's a lawyer, and then they figured out how to get him because he was coming for the costume and everything else. That felt... But the inclusion of the other ones felt more incorporated into the story than just a cameo. So, but bringing in those established characters, I definitely think helped push my interest a little bit. But I don't know. I liked Jennifer and her friend there well enough, and I was getting into that. Well, that was my problem. I wanted them to kind of pick something and go with it,
right?
And that was kind of their point was that they were kind of setting up all this different stuff to have this fourth wall break thing at the end kind of work or not work, or whatever you want to say. But I was really hoping that they would lean further into that workspace comedy kind of deadpan kind of thing, and it felt like they just had too much. They were just going back and forth between too much other things to really get that focused on, I guess.
Yeah, I just felt like they weren't sure what they wanted to do with the show, and I felt like they had a lot of little objectives in this show, but no real plan or arc for the overall story.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I almost wonder if maybe they weren't even sure that they were going to do the big fourth wall break until the very end. Like they could have very well have just decided at the last second, like, oh, we set up all this stuff, let's not do the big fourth wall, let's just have that follow through and end it like that. So I almost wonder if they were going back and forth saying like, oh, maybe we shouldn't, maybe we should. For a little bit of context, she kind of jumps out of Disney Plus and into the real world and goes to the writers and says, no, this isn't how I want the show to end. And in some ways I appreciated that they were kind of turning the mirror on themselves and saying like, how many times have we seen the villain steal the blood of the superhero to turn themselves into the reflection of the superhero? And that was the big thing for me. Why it worked was because in that finale, they were leaning into those kind of MCU cliches. And I was like, are they real? There must be something more to this than just the stealing the blood to turn into the other version so they can fight. And so that's why it worked a little bit more for me. I'm glad that it was intentional, but I was so concerned that they were just leaning into that same typical storytelling structure that they do. And then they were like, no, we know that that's kind of our shtick and we want to switch it up. But to me, the whole point was how Jennifer Walters was kind of taking control and saying, no, this is my story. And she's like, oh, we're going to do this my way. We're going to take them to court and do things without battling and blah, 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 which I love. But then they just ended the show, which is kind of to your point.
They didn't actually do it.
Right. It was kind of like they had their cake and they ate it too, which they did the setup and this clever kind of like switch up, but then they didn't actually give us a satisfying ending. It was just like, oh, we're all in the happy barbecue and Daredevil's there and everything else, which was funny, but it was just kind of like, it felt kind of tacked on and not a true solid ending to that. I almost wish this fourth wall break thing happened in the previous episode, in the 8th episode, and then they did a whole almost like maybe entirely in the courtroom kind of thing to really drive home that courtroom drama. How she's going to be
not going to be a typical superhero.
Right, exactly. I think that would have worked better.
And that's the thing, is I just feel like they never really grabbed onto what they wanted her and the show to be. Yeah, I enjoyed some of the fourth wall break stuff, like, obviously, the Kevin Feige's really an AI, he's not a real person and all that stuff. That was clever, but again, they just did all that and then didn't really pay it off.
Right, exactly. I agree with that.
In the narrative. I would say strong points. I mean, to me, I look back on this show, when they announced She-Hulk, I wasn't familiar with I was familiar with the character, but not like I've read the comics or anything else. So I wasn't super excited for that. What hooked me on this show was when they announced it was Tatiana Maslany that was going to be playing her. And I'm like, oh my, then I was totally on board and so looking forward to this show, because loved her in, I think I've said that 14 times already, in Orphan Black.
Orphan Black, yep.
And just the fact that, this is another sort of dual character. And I think she did great with what they gave her. I don't feel like they gave her a lot. She was funny in some of the fourth wall moments. She's a good physical actress. So like I said, I think she did great with not a lot to work with, I thought. What are your particular strong moments? That's a good transition, because I was just thinking how much I loved the cameos. Not necessarily, I guess they're not really cameos, but kind of them incorporating the old cheesy heroes and villains like Mr. Immortal and Leapfrog or Frogman, who's been in he just randomly shows up in a Marvel comic sometimes. And I guess they're not doing a second season, or they don't have any plans to at the moment, but I was hoping that this show could be kind of a great way to incorporate some of those goofier villains into the MCU. I would like to see like Paste Pot Pete, or just one of those goofy, the Wizard maybe, one of those kind of more goofy villains that aren't really relevant enough for a big epic
even a whole show or a movie or something.
Well, that's great, and that just points to another. Okay, here's another sort of thread or thing they could have done with the show. It's like, here's the show, and through this, the legal milieu, they're going to bring in all these obscure Marvel characters, and there'll be the adventure of the week of how does Jen process their legal problem, and then she has to go do some superheroing stuff too to kind of, because they go off the deep end or whatever. That kind of theme could have been a great trope for the show to kind of explore.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I thought they were setting up, but I guess
and
not
it just
really.
Doesn't seem like that's what they were doing.
Yeah, well, I almost wonder if maybe I think these shows are kind of struggling a little bit because they're only getting one season, so they're trying to set up so many different elements. They're trying to stay true to the comics and put in as much stuff as they can while telling a cohesive story, and they can't, like, when you have a show that might be renewed, you have certain things that you can set up and then not necessarily pay off, but when you only have one season to do something, you have a lot of people trying to do a lot of different things. So I think I really wish. It's interesting that we're getting Loki season 2, and is there any other second seasons coming out for
Loki
besides
season
Loki?
2, I think, is the only thing that's confirmed.
That's interesting.
There's been there's been rumors that Hawkeye might come back.
That seems like the next most logical.
And it's also clear that Hawkeye was like originally intended to be a film. I think that's why that one hangs together so well for me, because it really was more like a 6-hour
like that was
MCU movie than it was
much more of a traditional MCU movie,
just start to finish story. Well, there's also, with this, after the success of Werewolf by Night, I know we're not going to specifically talk about that show on this this episode of our show, but that was tremendous. And I've heard that they are, with the success of that, they're now looking at more of these sort of one-off things where they're going to do like a 60 to maybe 90 minute just one-off special episode where they can pour all the resources into it.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And just tell one very strict story, like the Guardians Christmas special wasn't even on my radar. Obviously, I was going to watch it, but it wasn't even on my radar. But the trailer was tremendous. Yeah, it's seems like a great idea for a Christmas special with those characters. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the MCU. What shows get renewed? Obviously, now Armor Wars is suddenly going to be a film, which that really surprises me a little bit.
Well, I was actually kind of surprised that Don Cheadle would, like, he's such a big actor. I'm surprised that they didn't just make it a movie, because I feel like he might have enough star power to carry that.
Oh, he definitely does. I think he does. Anyway, so getting back to
She-Hulk.
She-Hulk. I think.
I mean, going back to the stuff that I liked about it, I really did think it was funny. There were some really, like, I just loved everything involving Emil Blonsky and his little, like, cult of wives and his retreat and everything else. I thought that was hilarious. And then Leapfrog I thought was great. And then I loved, I guess now we can talk about Daredevil. I loved his portrayal. He felt very similar in terms of how he talked and acted and spoke and everything to the Netflix show, but obviously he was a little bit more lighthearted because he's with all these new goofy, like, more lighthearted characters. I don't want to say goofy, but more lighthearted characters from the MCU, and obviously they had awesome CGI stunts and everything. And one thing I thought was really funny is they almost set up a hallway fight scene, like they were, like, he walks into because I almost wonder if they were, like, scared to do it because they knew they couldn't really like compete with
justice,
the Netflix shows. So, but then and it would kind of take, like, having that big extended hallway fight scene would be kind of excessive for what is really a cameo. But then, of course, She-Hulk comes in and just plows everybody down on one thing, which I thought was hilarious. But I just loved how he had the chains connecting his billy club, and he was, like, bouncing them all around, and a lot of more CGI related stunts and stuff, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, no, that episode was great. I thought his portrayal was great. I thought her relationship was great. I think you sort of got, like, it seemed like, Hulk, Bruce Banner, Mark Ruffalo was trying to kind of help her sort of process, what this life is like and how to conduct yourself and all this stuff and how to deal with it. And she kind of really basically told him to go pound sand, but she knew better. And then I almost felt like that element came back in her conversations with Daredevil. And it seemed like maybe she was more open to listening to it at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot too, like you were saying about the decision to, maybe there was kind of a late breaking decision how far they were going to take that fourth wall break in the season finale. And I think it points back to the whole fact that supposedly the opening episode with Hulk and them being on the island there was originally supposed to happen much later in the show. That's
right.
Which blows my mind. I can't imagine. I just feel like we would have been even more off kilter through the show if that hadn't come first. Yeah. So overall, I hoped for more. There was definitely some funny parts. The Daredevil episode was great. The stuff with Wong and Emil Blonsky was very good. I just wish that the show had more of like a direction. And I don't want to go too far down this path, but I do feel like, the show was definitely, I felt the show was a little bit self-conscious in terms of anticipating some of the backlash that they expected from toxic male fans. I think they got preoccupied with fighting against that before the show even came out. It's like, it was almost like they anticipated pushback on the show from that element of fandom and kind of went after it as opposed to just, to me, I just felt like the best way to deal with trolls is to just make your story just so awesome and just not even acknowledge their existence. Just tell this great story and just make it so awesome that doesn't even matter.
I would have liked to have seen them just put more thought into any one thing, as opposed to, like, there's that plot line and there's Bruce going off into space, there's Daredevil, there's all this different stuff happening. Yeah. So I just think there could have just been more care put into one particular thing, and it was just
too many
different things for them to balance to handle appropriately.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, there was just too many things. And holy Moses, like, talk about the show wrapping up too quickly, like we've talked about. Then the thing at the end with Hulk and his son, what's his name, Scratchy?
Something like that. Scar. I don't know anything about the extended Hulk universe really, but I know he's been in the comics for a little bit.
Yeah, but that was just kind of like, huh?
Right. Well, yeah. That it seemed to me that whatever, he went off to Sakaar or something while everything was going on, and discovered that maybe he had some relationship with somebody while he was on there before Thor 3. So that's kind of what I think. But it seemed like kind of a strange place to just kind of pop it in. But they needed some sort of resolution to where he was that whole time and what the spaceship was doing at the beginning and everything else. So that's another thing I felt like could have been fleshed out more, but who knows? Yeah,
so final analysis for me, thumbs up on Tatiana Maslany, thumbs up on the cameos and some of the elements that they brought into that. There was some fun fourth wall breaking and some fun, just different elements to the show, but overall I just felt like it was just kind of all over the place and never really settled.
Yeah, I was more positive on it. I really enjoyed it overall, but I do think that there could have been a little bit more focus on one particular element, or they could have just gone farther with that fourth wall break and kind of tied it together a little bit better.
Okay, so that's a wrap on She-Hulk. Two things I need to get to are, first of all, we forgot to say Happy Godzilla Day to everybody. Today is the 68th anniversary of the original Godzilla in 1954. We're going to see a special showing of a 2002 Godzilla film tonight. Excited about that. So happy Godzilla Day to all of you all out there.
That's important.
That's very important. And also, I completely screwed up on this whole Andor thing. I'm like, jeez, I thought the finale was after the big attack
Heist.
And then they left.
Right.
I thought that was a season finale. I thought we were getting a short season of like 6 or 8 episodes. And apparently the show is still on, and I don't know what I've been doing for the last couple of weeks. So
I know, yeah. But I was only planning on talking about the next 3 episodes anyway, and so that'll give us some more stuff to talk about. But the episodes 4, 5, and 6 I thought were... I mean, each episode just seems to get better and better in terms of just fleshing out the world and giving us familiar things, but kind of different angles of how the Empire operates and bringing new ways of seeing things. I particularly liked how intimidating they made the TIE fighter, like that one TIE fighter that kept coming over them while they were training for their mission. And there was just that one. It's like you've seen 8 gazillion TIE fighters before, but this is just that one.
That one was like scary.
Genuinely scary. And that I thought that went through the entire those 3 episodes, especially that just the suspense and tenseness of that hostage situation and them stealing the money and everything else. I thought was incredible, and the interactions, just them not trusting each other because he's getting paid and everything else, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, the reveal of as that group got together to perpetrate the attack on the payroll. I don't remember the name of the planet that they're on. That whole revelation of where everybody stood, what everyone's issues and problems and fears, etc. was incredible. Yeah, I can't say enough about how one of the great compliments I give this show is how much it doesn't feel like Star Wars. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
the sounds of the blasters are a little bit different,
right?
And they look a little bit different. Like so much, you get a nostalgic moment, obviously, but I can't just the impact of the TIE fighters just being so different.
Well, that to me, that this is doing what I think they tried to do with The Last Jedi, which is like reframing. Like, so The Last Jedi, the big kind of one of the big set pieces is the tiny ship being chased by all of which didn't work at all. But to me, that was a direct kind of like, oh well, we've seen all these fast-paced battles, so why don't we do something a little bit different? It's a slow battle in space, but that seemed more like they were just trying to force all of these ideas that it just wasn't the film to do it in, and then the writing didn't work, and the whole thing all just collapsed, which a lot of people would disagree, but I think it's a pretty poorly written film. But this is a great example of how to do that, and
without crapping on everything.
Right, and not even without crapping on it, but just doing it in a way that is natural and it's separate from the main kind of story, so you can kind of do other things, but it still supplements the rest of the universe and adds on so many different pieces of, I don't want to say necessarily lore, but just we've never really seen anything like an office building, but I don't even know if you've gotten to those episodes where Cyril gets hired for that Imperial job where there's just that huge room of people sitting at the...
Actually, no, I know that's coming. I haven't gotten to that. But I can see that's coming. Well, just his whole character. And that's such an interesting, different character, Cyril, for... You feel like he's this kind of like burgeoning, like... psychopath or sociopath.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because he's getting more unhinged as the show goes on. Because at first you're kind of like, oh, well, he's just trying to follow the rule. Like, obviously you don't agree with him at all, but like he has his kind of method of doing things, and that's his character. But then slowly he just starts to unravel and gets more and more, and you see how like his relationship with his family and everything else, and it's just, I just really love how all of the portrayals of the villains and their just kind of interactions is just so much more nuanced than in Obi-Wan. It just, I think back to like this empire that we're seeing is just so much more like subtly and diabolically evil.
Diabolical corporation.
Right, whereas in Obi-Wan, I just imagine Obi-Wan smuggling Leia under his cloak, and all the people are like, like it just doesn't even seem like the same empire.
Right.
And that's without Darth Vader choking anyone or the Emperor coming out on screen. It's all just done through these very human and I guess really human characters. There really hasn't been a whole lot of droids or aliens, or anything,
and just how just how insidious the Empire seems here, how deeply it affects everybody personally. But just to circle back for one quick second on that Cyril character too, it's just the way you described him, and I know I haven't seen some of what you hinted at here yet, but just the fact that you've never seen a character like that. That's a character you would expect to see in just some psychological thriller movie or some detective, like very hard-boiled cable detective show, not Star Wars, you know what I mean? So just that's fantastic. And one of the things that made me realize that I had missed a bunch of episodes, because I was looking at the cast to refresh myself on some of the cast member names and saw Fiona Shaw. who we know so well from, a million things, including Harry Potter. And I'm like, yeah, what happened to her? And I'm like, they kind of left it. So that just made me say, wait a second, did I really see the finale, or is there more? And so I guess pleasant surprise, there is more. But yeah, the characters were tremendous. It was pretty believable. There wasn't a lot of that like Star Wars tech that becomes, all of a sudden we're in the Dark Ages when it suits us, and then we're super hyper technologically advanced when it suits us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does.
They walked a pretty fine line with that.
It does go back and forth. Well, actually, this is later too. Later it goes back and forth between Coruscant, which is a lot more like futuristic, but I really do love hearing the more kind of. It's really engaging and interesting, but kind of like day to day, like politics and talking back and forth in the council meetings and that sort of thing. As much as everyone craps on that element of the prequels, growing up, to me, that was part of Star Wars, is the big rotunda room where they're all talking and floating around, and that is in a little bit handled
so well
episodes.
here.
Yeah, it's definitely handled a lot better in this show too.
It stays at a certain level. It's like keeping these systems in line, and how sometimes the Empire uses corporations to do that. They don't even do that themselves. They farm it out. That's got a very real business world feel that people can relate to. All of the office politics with Mon Mothma and or not Mon Mothma. Who's the sort of CIA, the Empire CIA people who are. And there's that one.
Oh, the Imperial Security Bureau.
Is that Vel Sartha? Is that the character?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
She's like, trying to make a name for herself, and like that's just all very real. I think it speaks to the Gilroys, and just we've seen what.
Yeah, with Bourne and everything.
We've seen what he's done with the Bourne films, and what he did with Rogue One.
I know I would be really interested in seeing how Rogue One would be if he had it from the very beginning, and not to diminish Gareth Edwards' work on that. I love Rogue One, but this show seems to be more what I was expecting from Rogue One, even though Rogue One is a lot of similar kind of espionage, spy, military, corporate elements.
It's still very Star Wars.
It's still very Star Wars, which works for that time period and everything, but this is really what I wanted, like the really tense, atmospheric, corporate espionage kind of stuff.
It reminds me of what makes Winter Soldier one of the best, in my opinion, still the best MCU film. Is it just really stripped away a lot of the superhero veneer and just told this really gritty political spy thriller story, and they just sold it. I mean, they just went for that, and it obviously has all the connective tissue to the larger thing, and I think that's what this does too.
Right.
It's got that connective tissue. The events that are kind of going on around this, and slowly but surely, and it's going to bring in a lot of, I know over time, a lot more characters that we're familiar with, and we'll see the connection points to some of the big, very Star Wars-y type elements of the Empire and the Rebellion and everything else. But I don't know that I have. I just really enjoyed how it all came together. Their preparation. Stellan Skarsgård.
He's great.
Really good.
He's so good.
I'm very curious to see. There's so many threads, and maybe there's already stuff. Don't tell me that's happening. Like again, what's happening with his stepmom? What's happening with Bix? Like that woman who's sort of his love interest, but she's kind of with the guy who owns the fix-it shop, and then and what about his sister? Is she really alive?
Oh right, yeah, they haven't really touched on that since the first episode.
Yeah, and how he's sort of his origin is in this like almost sort of prehistoric, pre-technology civilization that he grew up in, and then just fell into. Yeah, that was interesting. Technological spacefaring civilization that he wasn't even aware of. So just so many great elements. Can't say enough about how this has gone. What other things do you want to touch on?
I mean, all the visuals and sound has been great. The music has been. It just seems like there's a lot of more care put into this than the Obi-Wan show, which. Like the visuals, I just didn't think were all that great. I mean, they were fine. They worked. That show just felt very rushed and not a lot of care was put into it. It was just kind of like, oh, well, we have all these actors and they're not really doing anything right now and they're not getting any younger, so we should throw this onto Disney Plus to get attention, whereas this felt like there's much more of a real spirit and intention behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something to maybe to touch on too, is that, like, look at it compared to the other shows. So we've got The Mandalorian, which is solid and very good, has some great moments, has some very cheesy Star Wars moments. It does have that thing that we've talked about before. It's got that very sort of simplistic,
very basic,
widest common denominator storytelling. I don't know, and again, I don't know whether that's because they feel like there's a huge, child audience in Disney Plus, and so they want to make it as simple as possible. But I always feel like, when we were kids, you were always sucked in, and even if you didn't understand everything that was going on, you were like, wow.
Exciting visuals and stuff like that.
Well, no, but all this, all this stuff that maybe people would think would be too complicated, that's almost what drew me into some of those shows, even if I didn't fully grasp everything that was going on. I was like, wow, something's going on. Then you've got Boba Fett, which I just thought was
that was kind
very disappointing.
Just
had some okay moments.
The best episode was the Mandalorian one where he came back,
he went off on his own,
and it was just basically a Mandalorian episode. Yeah, that was disappointing, especially because they kind of teased that to be a more gritty crime related show, and then it was more just him becoming a generic kind of hero and saving the world and everything else.
And just we're all on between Mandalorian and some of the stuff in the movies and Boba Fett, we're all on Tatooine overload.
Oh, that was it. That's the other thing. Yeah, there's a lot of great variation in the planets here, too, in Andor.
Yeah, so it's funny. It just shines a light on how differently these shows are being produced. And so hopefully this one continues on the path that it's been on. And hopefully we get more shows like this, because I think the reaction has there been any negative reaction to this show?
I think that it's very positive. I think it's doing the worst out of all of the Star Wars shows in terms of viewer numbers.
Really?
Yeah.
That shocks me.
Which is disappointing, because I think Obi-Wan did the highest. So
is it because people just don't have because this is not dealing with any of the primary characters?
Yeah, I think that might be it.
I mean, Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Kind of a one-off.
I think Mandalorian kind of gained popularity especially because of Baby Yoda and stuff, and people that was the big hook there. Whereas this is just a very straightforward kind of thriller TV kind of, but with Star Wars. So yeah,
that's interesting because people. I mean, think of all the streaming and hardcore cable shows that are all these political thrillers and like The Americans and there's a million.
Yeah, well, maybe
people seem to love these types of shows, so why wouldn't they like this with a little bit of Star Wars?
Maybe once people, now that it's been a few episodes and people have seen it and said, "Oh, it's good," maybe it'll start doing better numbers, because that was a few weeks ago that I read that. So we'll have to see.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm certainly going to talk it up to whoever I can, But yeah, I just think it's tremendous. I've seen everything I've seen about it. Whenever I've seen anybody talking about it online, has been incredibly positive. So I am surprised to hear that the viewership isn't that great, but hopefully it grows.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And a lot of people I've told that, hey, this show's being produced by the guy that did the Bourne movies, and once I say that, a lot of people love
those are
those Bourne movies.
Universally liked.
Yeah, so
I think that about wraps up what I want to have to say, and we'll definitely have more once the show ends.
Yeah,
maybe we'll wait for the next 6 episodes.
Is there 6 more?
We've covered 6, and there's 12 episodes total. Yeah. So maybe we'll wait for me
to catch up and get my head out of my ass. Yeah,
catch up. Yeah, I got to watch Rings of Power too. That will be my next show that I watch.
We will be back to wrap up on Andor, and excited to do so. We'll just cover however many remaining episodes are between the ones that I have to watch and however many are left. And I've finished Rings of Power and House of the Dragon. Really enjoyed both of those. I'd probably say I enjoyed Rings of Power a little bit more, but we can talk about those when we've gotten to the Werewolf by Night.
Yeah, that was awesome.
We've got a lot of Halloween stuff. We're definitely going to do sort of a Halloween roundup on all the current and classics that we watched through the Halloween season. Hate to see spooky season go. Plenty of stuff coming up. Obviously, right around the corner is Wakanda Forever
Yeah, looking forward to that.
is on the horizon. So tons of stuff that we're excited to talk about. Excited to share our thoughts with you all. And I think we've got some things happening. We might be finally putting together a dedicated Twitter page for our show, so we can actually start to interact with folks a little bit more and hear what people think and want to hear about or not. But excited for that as we try to grow this thing a little bit more. We've definitely taken this slow and simple approach up to now. But hope you all have enjoyed what you've heard. Where you are able to, if you can, give us a little star or like or subscribe. Please do so. And we will be back.